Your whole screen? God dang. Don't nobody wanna hop on with a nigga. I'ma just hop on TikTok.
After this, the attorney gave me the documents one by one and told me what each one was about. This document is for the name change. We'll file a petition and your name will be changed to Jasmine. This document is an agreement about inheritance. In the future, you will be a part of the will, but your inheritance will be smaller compared to Parker's. This contract is about social media usage. You're prohibited from opening TikTok or Instagram accounts and sharing information about the family in any other way. Finally, this contract is for your allowance. Every month, you will be given an allowance of this amount written here. You will not be able to demand more than that. After telling me all this, the attorney offered me a pen and said, "Please sign under every agreement." I didn't like this one bit, but I wasn't in a position to argue. I had to sign them all. We stayed on the island for about a month. It was nowhere near the life I dreamed of. Parker and my new dad were distant to me. My new mom would talk to me now and then, but it was more in the lines of, "How are things with Parker? What kind of things are you doing together?" Unfortunately, my replies were not the kinds of things she would want to hear. I wanted to be closer to my new brother, but it wasn't possible because Parker had built this really high wall between us. My new dad had some work to do, so one morning our private jet arrived on the island and took us to London. After a while, we went to Tokyo. We stayed there for only 3 days. Then we flew to the city where the family actually lived. We were always traveling on our private plane and staying in our own homes whichever city we went to. When I was younger, I wanted to travel to different countries. But these trips were not at all like what I imagined them to be. Because of security reasons, we almost never went out. When you are inside a house, doesn't really matter if you're in London or Tokyo. 2.5 years ago, the mafia attempted to kidnap Parker. Thankfully, bodyguards stopped them. The kidnappers confessed that they tried to take Parker and asked for a ransom of $50 million. After that incident, security measures were enhanced. It was deemed dangerous for Parker to go to school, and decided that he should be homeschooled with private tutors. Now that I was their daughter, the same security measures applied to me. I was devastated when I found out about this. I was feeling incredibly lonely. I was looking forward to starting school, making new friends. If I was homeschooled, then the only kid around me would be Parker, and he did not like me at all. I'd always wanted to get adopted, have a family, but this was definitely not what I had dreamed of. At first, I loved that my new family was very rich, but then I saw that everything was good in moderation, and that included having an excessive amount of money. I think Parker wasn't happy with his life either, but he wasn't admitting it. My new mom went to another city on a business trip. I thought about going back to the group home without telling her, but then I thought that wouldn't be right. I waited for her. When she came back, I went to speak with her. I told her Parker didn't feel the need for a sister and he would never accept me as one. She thought I was right. "You're right, honey. Unfortunately, this was an unsuccessful attempt. You're free to do what you want to do." I told her I wanted to go back to the group home, but she suggested something else that changed my life in an instant. I was going to go to a private boarding school. They would obviously cover all my expenses. After high school, if I decided to go to college, they would give me a scholarship. Right now, I'm at a wonderful private school in Switzerland. Since it's a very expensive boarding school, the families of the kids here are pretty rich. But as far as I knew, there are no billionaires among them. Meanwhile, my new mom gives me a call now and then and insists that I spend my summer vacation with them. Even Parker called me once and invited me. I think I'm going to spend the summer on the island. If anything interesting happens, I'll definitely let you know.
And I'm Sarah. This is my sister Layla. She's 4 years younger than me. Unfortunately, my family loves her more than me. I'm not even sure if they love me at all. Actually, I've always been aware that my parents have been nicer and more understanding towards Layla. It had never bothered me because I thought it was normal for them to treat her this way since she was younger. But recently, after everything that has been happening, I began to suspect that my parents just like Layla a lot more than me. I'm going to tell you about everything that happened. All I ask is that you share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree that my parents are treating us differently? Please let me know. We moved to a new city during the summer. In our old house, Layla and I were sharing a room. Our new house is bigger, so now we each have our own room. We knew that summers in this region are really hot, but it turned out to be even hotter than we imagined. At night, we literally weren't able to sleep. The house had air conditioning only in our parents' bedroom and in the living room, so Layla and I didn't have it in our rooms. After a while, we had no choice but to start sleeping in the living room. I hated sleeping in the living room since I now had my own bedroom. But I didn't have any other choice, since our parents had spent a lot of money during the move, and it would be inconsiderate to ask them to buy 2 more air conditioners. One night, I went to the living room to go to sleep as always. Layla wasn't there yet. She didn't come before I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I was surprised to see that she wasn't there. On my way to the bathroom, I could hear that she was in her room. She was doing a TikTok. I went into her room to ask how she'd slept at night in the heat. And guess what? It wasn't hot there. Of course I was surprised. I looked up and saw the AC unit on the wall. Yes, my parents got her a brand new air conditioner that made her room nice and cool. So she was able to sleep like a baby in her own room that night. Of course, I was really mad. My mom and dad were having breakfast. I asked them why only Layla had gotten an air conditioner. Very calmly, my dad explained, "Your sister told me she wanted to sleep in her room and asked me if we could get her an air conditioner. So I went and got one for her. They installed it while you were at school." I began to tell him, "Dad, I live here too. You know that I don't like sleeping in the living room either." My mom quickly said, "We would have gotten you one if you'd have asked for it." So I said, "Let's get one then." And Dad said, "It might be difficult for us to buy it this month, but let's talk about this again next month." I didn't want to argue with them about it, but they were obviously playing favorites, and now they were babbling irrationally to cover it up. Like I said in the beginning, they had always been nicer to Layla, but this time what they did went way beyond that. The AC incident really changed how I viewed my parents' actions, and I began to notice more things like this. This is when I started to realize that my family I'm Sarah. I started to realize that my family loves Layla more than me. Let me give you another example. Ever since elementary school, I've had to do house chores every day. I do the laundry, I take out the trash. When my mom tells me she's going to be late from work, I cook. But I've never seen Layla so much as bring an empty glass from her room back to the kitchen. My mom makes her bed. I iron her clothes. Once when my mom told me, "Vacuum the living room," I said, "I need to study for a math exam I have tomorrow. Can Layla do it?" My mom said, "Of course not." So I asked, "Why not?" Do you know what she told me? "Because you need to do it." What kind of answer is that? And without another word, I did it like an idiot. Layla's birthday is coming up next month. I realized this when my mom said, "I thought I'd get Layla a cake shaped like the TikTok logo this year. What do you think?" For Layla's birthdays, she always gets a cake that looks like whatever she's into at the time. For example, last year she got a cake that looked like a Roblox character. But for my birthdays, my mom just bakes regular cakes. Ask my mom, it's a family tradition. She's baking my cake herself to show me how much she cares about me. Before, I would have believed it. But now I know that she doesn't care about me at all. Because if that were the case, she'd be baking Layla's cakes too. Once I started noticing things like this, they just kept on coming. Maybe it had always been this way, and I just never noticed. One morning, my sister came to the kitchen with a limp. She had hit her foot against the edge of the bed. She was very angry, saying, "Mom, I was writhing in pain on the floor for 10 minutes. I kept calling for you. Why didn't you come?" I couldn't believe my ears when I heard my mom's explanation. "Oh no, that was you calling me? I heard it, but I thought it was Sarah, so I didn't come. You sound so similar that I get confused. I wish I'd checked on you." She was saying these things like I wasn't there. It's like she wanted me to know she doesn't care about me at all. I couldn't take it and said, "Dear Layla, next time you should scream, 'I'm Layla, I'm Layla,' so that Mom knows it's you." My mom couldn't say anything everything but looked at me as if I were the one who did something wrong. It was so obvious that Layla was the little princess of the family, but I'd never figured it out because I'd always been so naive. Here's another example. My folks never ever miss one of Layla's performances at school. If it's during the day, my dad always takes time off from work. I don't get to perform anymore, but my dad rarely came to mine, even when I was little. When he couldn't make it, he'd just say he had to work. But when it comes to Layla, my dad doesn't seem to care much about work or anything else. My parents come to the theater early to find a good seat in the front row, and they cheer for their precious daughter like crazy during the whole show. The other issue with school is our grades. Whenever I get a good grade, my dad will say that either the questions were easy or I just got lucky that it was a subject I'd prepared for. He'll find a way to tell me that I didn't really deserve. Started to realize that my family always makes up excuses for her. Every time she gets a bad grade, he tells her, "You said you had a headache that morning, that must be it." Or, "That teacher is too demanding of you," to try to prove that it's not her fault. Things like this kept happening, and it made me really upset. I got hung up on stuff that I wouldn't normally care about. I had to find a way to solve this problem. I found a website that provides therapy online and signed up. It wasn't very expensive. I saved up my allowance for a while and got an appointment with a therapist from the site. We did a video call that lasted an hour. I told her about everything I'd been through. At the end of the session, she said, "Sarah, you can't solve this problem alone. Neither I nor another therapist can help you. You need to face your parents and tell them everything like you just told me. If they love both of you equally, which I believe is the case, they will have to convince you. Or you could be right, and they might be favoring your sister without being aware of it. If that's the case, it's again your parents who need to put in the effort so that you don't feel like they don't love you. So don't waste your time with therapists. The only way you can resolve this issue is with your family." What she was saying made a lot of sense. I decided to talk to my parents the first chance I got. Last Sunday, Layla was at a friend's house, so it was a good time. I said to my parents, "I need to talk to you about something important." Naturally, they were very curious. I think I talked nonstop for an hour and a half. They didn't interrupt me even once. They just listened. A couple of times I couldn't stop myself from crying. Actually, even telling them about everything felt really good. But unfortunately, their reaction did not make things any better. At first, they said, "We aren't playing favorites at all, and we love both of you very much." That wasn't the problem. But what my mom said next really hurt me. "Your personalities are so different. That might be why we're treating you and Layla differently. Layla is kind of like a cat. She only pays attention to us when we pay attention to her. Her natural inclination is to stay away from us. That's why we need to be extra nice to her all the time. Your personality is just the opposite." I turned red with rage when I heard that last sentence. I knew what she was saying, but I pretended I didn't understand. I asked, "What do you mean by opposite?" My mom couldn't say it outright. "Opposite of a cat's," she said. I think she was regretting the example she gave. I couldn't hold it in. "So you mean like a dog? Layla has the personality of a cat, and I'm like a dog. No matter how badly you treat the dog, it still comes back and sucks up to you, right? Is that what you actually think of me?" I asked. My mom shook her head. "I guess the way I said it didn't sound too good, but I just wanted to say you have different characters," she said, trying to defend herself. I think what my mom said clearly proved they were treating us very differently. When they saw that I was upset, they tried to console me. My dad said, "Both you and yours always makes up excuses for her. So precious. There's nothing you need to be upset about." But I'd already gotten my answer. They wanted to keep talking about this, but I couldn't take it. "So do you agree that my parents don't treat the two of us equally? I still feel that they love Layla more than they love me. And on top of that, my mom's cat and dog analogy about our personalities was really weird. Can you please share what..."
My name is Boris. My grandfather passed away last year. He was a very successful realtor. He specialized in expensive properties. That's how he kept building his fortune year after year. He became one of the richest people in the country. He was also known for being a curmudgeon, to the point that people avoided making eye contact with him. I rarely saw him smile. He was a good man, but he had a bad temper. He became even more intolerable after my grandmother died. He seemed to be trying to take out the pain of losing his wife of 50 years on people around him. My dad has two siblings, both brothers. They each have one kid, and they're also boys. So my grandfather has 3 sons and 3 grandsons. He bought 4 houses right next to each other. He lived in one of them, and his kids lived in the others. We lived in the house closest to my grandparents. The first thing I did every morning was to visit them. We always had breakfast together. We had a special connection. Unlike my grandfather, my grandmother was very affectionate. She always told me, "Boris, you're a good kid. You're our favorite grandson. I want you to know this. Your grandfather doesn't talk about these things, but you can be sure that he feels the same way about you." Like me, my cousins never went to visit them. Once, my older cousin Matt said, "I've never met anyone more obnoxious than Grandpa. If I see him on the street on my way home, I go through the backyard just to avoid him." My other cousin Ben didn't like my grandfather either. He used to say that to his parents and me every chance he got. Even though my grandfather was incredibly wealthy, the only thing he did for his children was to give each of them a house. Other than that, he never gave his sons any money. But my dad never complained about this. He always told me, "Your grandfather wanted his kids to stand on their own feet." I'm grateful to him for that. He did the right thing. My cousins treated my getting along with my grandparents as a joke. They'd say they always give us the same gifts for our birthdays. That's how we know your sucking up to our grandfather isn't working. It used to bother me when they'd say stuff like that. But eventually, I realized they were just saying it because they were jealous of me. The prospect of my grandfather leaving me his fortune made them uncomfortable. In fact, they were afraid of it. Before long, my suspicions about my cousins were proven true. My grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer. I was the first person he told this news. One morning, I went to visit him as I always did. "My name is Boris. My grandfather lung x-rays. I'll soon be joining your grandmother. I should be feeling happy about that, but instead I'm afraid. Does this make me a bad husband?" he asked. That day, I saw his human side for the first time. That surly old man we were used to was replaced with a nice old man who was afraid of dying. After they found out about my grandfather's illness, my cousins started visiting him all the time. Matt, who used to avoid him, started visiting him several times a day. At first, I thought they changed their attitude because they were sad about him being sick. But soon, their true intentions became clear. They wanted to get a piece of their grandfather's fortune. One evening, Ben called me. He said, "We need to talk." When I got to the coffee shop where we were supposed to meet, Matt was there too. I was wondering what this was about. Matt jumped right in. "Boris, has Grandpa drawn up his will yet? Do you know how he's going to divide the inheritance?" I was shocked. It disturbed me so much that while he was struggling with cancer, my cousins were after his money. "I have no idea, and I don't care," I said. "In fact, I find it really odd that this is what you're thinking about right now. I don't think this is right," I went on. Ben said, "Of course you're not worried. You did everything you could to get along with Grandpa. And what about us? How are we going to get our money?" I didn't like the way he was talking. "What are you talking about? I love Grandma and I love Grandpa. That's why I always had a good relationship with them." Matt said, "I'm really curious about what you love about Grandpa. You're not fooling us. We know what you're up to. Do you think we're stupid?" Now this was too much. My grandfather is struggling with a terrible disease. I couldn't care less about the will or the inheritance. I just want him to live as long as possible. "I don't care what you think. You only remind me of vultures," I said, and left. I wish I'd never seen their faces again after that day. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible.
The census is coming this August. Look out for instructions on what to do. The census. Every stat tells a story. Authorized by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Canberra.
I visited my grandfather more often now because I wanted to spend more time with him. Every time I went over, one would leave and the other would show up. "Do you want to watch a movie?" I was disgusted by them because I knew what they were up to. But I wasn't about to tell my grandfather any of this. It would be so unfair to burden him with something like this. In fact, my grandfather seemed happy with what was going on. It with them. I guess he had softened up since he didn't have a lot of time left. My cousins were taking advantage of this change. They were naturally very happy that he was on X-rays. I'll soon be joined. It's weird, but he was always chatting with them. I guess he had softened up since he didn't have a lot of time left. My cousins were taking advantage of this change. They were naturally very happy that he was treating them well. They were now sure that he would include them in his will. And they had probably started making plans about what to do with the money that they would inherit. One morning, what I was fearing finally happened. I knocked on my grandfather's door. He didn't answer. I rang the bell for a long time, still nothing. I guess because I was expecting this, I knew right away that we'd lost him. The next day, my cousins were already talking about money. I was right behind them at the funeral. They didn't notice that I was there. Matt said the lawyer just called my dad. He told the whole family to come to his office tomorrow. He's gonna read my grandfather's will. Ben giggled, saying, "Yes, we're gonna be rich tomorrow." I didn't want to go to the lawyer's office. I told this to my father that night. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Your grandfather instructed his lawyer to read his will in front of the whole family. I think he donated all of his money to charity. Your uncles also think so. So tomorrow we'll all be there, just as a formality." I agreed to go. Plus, it would be fun to see how upset my cousins would get once their dreams of getting rich got crushed. We were in the lawyer's office early next morning. 3 sons, 3 daughters-in-law, and of course, 3 grandsons. Ben leaned towards me. He whispered, "For years, you put up with Grandpa for nothing. See, we made it to the same level as you in just 4 months. I think he even liked us more than you. We'll find out in a minute." When the lawyer took out the will, I glanced towards Matt and Ben. They were giddy with excitement. The lawyer began reading the document. "My dear family, right now I'm with my beloved wife. I don't think you're gonna miss an ill-tempered old man like me. I'm not gonna take much of your time with this silly will business. I'll dive right in. You know, life has been very generous with me, and I've amassed a substantial fortune. My dear sons, I didn't let you live a rich man's life because I wanted you to stand on your own 2 feet. You understood me well, and you did everything on your own. I don't think you need any more money. Please continue in the same manner. I love you and my daughters-in-law very much." After the lawyer read all this, I saw my dad and my uncles smile. My older uncle said, "Just as would be expected of Dad. You didn't surprise us. We love you too. Our dear Dad, rest in peace." Meanwhile, Matt and Ben were holding their breath, waiting without a peep. The lawyer kept reading the will. After they found out about my illness, my dear grandsons Matt and Ben remembered that they actually had a grandfather. I have to admit that it was most entertaining to watch you falling all over me to get a slice of the inheritance. I guess you took me for a naive old man. It's weird, but he was always chatting with them. I guess he had enough for you to have acted like you liked me. The parents started laughing when they heard this. Matt's mom said, "Look at these little devils. We weren't even aware of this. They've been after the inheritance." Matt and Ben turned bright red. "Nonsense. We were taking care of Grandpa because he was sick." They started babbling unconvincingly. "We're almost done. Let me finish," the lawyer said, and kept on reading. "And finally, my dear grandson Boris, you've been close to your grandmother and me since the day you started walking. I know I didn't give you enough attention, but you're a good kid. I know you will forgive me for it. Even though I know you loved us without expecting anything in return, I still want to give you a present. When you turn 18, I want you to use half of my fortune to set up a foundation and run it. The foundation is to provide scholarships for poor children and make sure they get a good education. The other half of my fortune is yours. I only have one condition. You are not to give anything to Ben or Matt, so that they learn their lesson." This was totally unexpected on my part. I was so proud that my grandfather trusted me with the responsibility of running such an organization, and I wouldn't have to work, thanks to the money he left me, which meant I could dedicate all of my time to the foundation. Needless to say, that day was a huge disappointment for my cousins. It took them a long time to get over it. Now they're both studying to get into college. My grandfather always said, "You can't take an elevator up to success. You can only reach it by climbing the stairs step by step." Yes, You can't earn anything either.
My 12th birthday, my mom gave me this heart-shaped locket. Inside, there's a picture of my mom on one side and of me on the other. She told me, through this necklace, I'll be with you wherever you go. You can always look at it when you miss me. That year, both my parents died in a boating accident. I was the only one who survived. I didn't have any relatives to look after me, so I was placed in a group home. My life was completely upended. I would stare at my mother's picture and cry all day long. Eventually, a musician couple adopted me. Thanks to them, I started living again. But one day, they said to me, Layla, we've decided to get a divorce. Unfortunately, we can't be your adoptive parents anymore. At 18, I had to go back to the group home. You're allowed to live in the home until you turn 21. Since I was over 18, I could leave whenever I wanted, but I had nowhere else to go. So I reluctantly stayed there. In the meantime, I started looking for work. If I started making money, I could get myself out of there. I'd hit rock bottom again. My only source of support was my mom, who I was carrying inside my locket. One day, the director called me into his office. There was an old guy in the room with him. The director said, Layla, I have great news for you. This gentleman represents a family that wants to adopt you. I did not expect this. I said, thank you very much, but I just turned 18. I want to start building a life on my own. The man said calmly, Miss Layla, if you accept our offer, we will make a donation of $5 million to the home. It was obviously a wealthy family, but I was weary of another adoption adventure. I looked at the director. He was waiting for my response with excitement. Well, $5 million is a lot of money, so he was right to get excited. I had to say yes, but only because I was thinking of the home. The following day, a luxury car picked me up and took me to the airport. We got on a private plane. I didn't even know where we were going. Shortly after takeoff, the old man came to me. He told me his name was Leon and he was an attorney. I'm sure you're curious about your new family. You're in for a big surprise, because you've been adopted by a king, he said. He was right. Of course, I was surprised. I had so many questions. I bombarded Mr. Leon with them. He politely answered all of them. He told me that the country where we were headed was made up of 3 islands in the middle of the ocean. Its total population is 170,000. There were portraits of the former members of the royal family on the walls. I still couldn't believe that I'd been adopted by a king. I was scared to pinch myself because if this was a dream, I did not want to wake up from it. Mr. Leon introduced me to Miss Isla. She was the butler at the palace. He told me she was the one who'd take care of me. She was a warm and friendly lady. First, she took me to the dining hall. Would you like to eat something before you head to your room? Every day, we prepare 99 dishes for the buffet. What would you like? I thanked her and said, I'm not hungry at all. Even seeing all this food makes me full. Miss Isla then took me to my quarters. I was staring around, mesmerized. My room was magnificent. 3 other people walked in. Miss Isla said, the royal tailors will take your measurements. They'll make you dresses you can wear every day or on special occasions. They're thinking about 100 everyday dresses and 100 gowns to begin with. Will that be enough for you? Please don't get me wrong, but isn't that a little too much? Miss Isla replied, in that case, for now we'll do 10 each. I was going to say, even that feels excessive, but Miss Isla said, in the morning you will meet the king. I'll leave you to rest. I'm sure you need it, and left with the tailors. I was so excited when I heard I was going to meet the king. What was he like? Would he like me? Why had he adopted me? Before I could even change my clothes, I fell asleep, a million questions running in my head. I woke up to a strange sound. It was coming from my window. Because my room was so high up, I thought it was a bird. When I opened the curtain, I couldn't believe my eyes. A giraffe was staring at me. I opened the window right away. I started petting the giraffe's head. Somebody yelled from downstairs, I'm sorry, is she bothering you? No, I love this. Do you have animals like this one around here? I asked. The person downstairs said, we have giraffes, peacocks, deer, parrots, even pandas here. You may run into them while walking in the garden. Are you their caretaker? I asked. Yes, my name is Lucas, he said, and I shouted down, pleased to meet you. And I'm Layla. When Lucas said, I'm pleased to meet you too. I'll see you around. Bella now needs to feed a baby. I yelled, can I come with you? I've never seen a baby giraffe. 5 minutes later, I was with Lucas alongside the baby giraffe. Unfortunately, this baby's mother died during labor. Bella is feeding her, he said, and they started tearing up.